Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite. Ricardo Geromel aqui. Eu sou sócio da 3D Radar, um fundo de investimento que tem a 3D Capital como sócia relevante. E hoje eu estou aqui com o Jeff Weistein, que é um amigo, investidor, está falando diretamente do Vale do Silício. A ideia aqui com o Instituto Caldeira é trazer um pouco do melhor do mundo aqui para a gente aprender com eles e melhorar os nossos negócios. Antes de começar, o papo vai ser em inglês. Quem quiser, tem um botãozinho aí da tradução, você vai poder ouvir em português, tradução instantânea que o Instituto Caldeira está fazendo. E uma outra coisa que pediram para eu avisar para vocês é que nessa sexta-feira, dia 27, vai ter um happy hour lá no Caldeira, no Jardim, a partir das 5. Então, vamos lá, vamos começar, que o tempo é curto e temos muito para aprender aqui, para trocar. Se você tiver qualquer pergunta, escreve aí no Zoom e no final da conversa eu vou perguntar para o Jeff, ou talvez eu pergunte no meio. Então, realmente não hesite, faça aí a tua pergunta, escreve aí. Eu estou realmente impressionado com o avanço do Instituto Caldeira, realmente velocidade chinesa. Que incrível ver como isso está crescendo rápido. Jeff, I just made a very brief intro, some housekeeping. People will be asking you questions, but I did not introduce you, my friend. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ricardo. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It's a pleasure to be here. I co-head the investment team at FJ Labs. We are an early stage venture capital firm. We are with a global focus, but we have been very, very active in Latin America, particularly in Brazil. I have been at the firm for 5 years now. Prior to that, I was at Lux Capital, which is an early stage venture capital firm based in New York. And I worked at a hedge fund before that and come from a finance background. And the reason I joined FJ Labs was because I wanted to work with the foremost angel investor in the world. And I think Fabrice Grinda is that man. And Fabrice and his partner, Jose, have been entrepreneurs for over 20 years. They're serial entrepreneurs. You may have heard of Fabrice because he founded a business called OLX, which is one of the world's largest online classified sites, very active in Brazil. And Jose founded a business called Derramate in Latin America, which was an early online auction site which merged with Mercado Libre, which you all, of course, know. So deep roots in Latin America. We were seed investors in Rappi, seed investors in Nuvum Shop, seed investors in Loft, and a host of other really interesting startups in Latin America. And while we do invest globally, we see a lot of interesting opportunities in the Latin America region, particularly in Brazil. And we're proud to be among the most active investors there.
Jeff, so much to unpack on what you have just said. You guys have done over 700 investments as a firm. So many successful investments in Brazil. I'm sure a couple not as successful is part of the game. So please, and you were with Lux before, which is also a world-class VC fund. Tell us what is special, what is different about your current fund. And OLX is what you say here in Brazil, OLX.
Sure.
People may not.
Yes.
So go ahead, please.
Pardon my poor Portuguese. The FJ Labs is really a unique firm. I don't know of another place in the world like it. And what makes us unique is that we have taken the common practice of angel investing, of being a business angel, and institutionalizing it and bringing it to a venture scale. So we invest in about 150 startups every year. We don't lead deals, meaning we're not the ones setting the terms. We're not the ones determining the valuation, doing the heavy diligence, but rather we decide very quickly. Typically, our decision process is 2 phone calls, and we work very closely with prominent venture capital funds in the region. So in Brazil, historically, we've worked closely with Kazek, with Monashis, with Canary, Atlantico, all of the top firms in the region. They like to work with us because we move very quickly. We can decide in 1 phone call if we really have to, and we have very deep marketplace expertise. So our focus is online marketplaces, and we define that broadly. That can be any website or service that is bringing together a transaction, typically a buyer or seller, but we could have three-sided marketplaces. There are all sorts of different marketplaces. And so we have the world's largest portfolio of online marketplaces. As you mentioned, we've made over 700 investments. About 500 of them are some form of marketplace. So we have very, very deep marketplace expertise. And Fabrice and Jose, between the two of them, have founded 5 businesses with 4 very successful exits. And then we've co-founded another 10. So entrepreneurial expertise, marketplace expertise, and moving faster than basically anyone else in the world.
It's so different from my day-to-day to make an investment decision in 2 phone calls. Amazing. Please, I think it would be nice to go deeper into one example. So I know that now you're on the board of a Brazilian company, ViajaNet.
Yes.
So maybe you use that as an example of how you guys make decisions. And also here in the audience, we have all kinds of people. We have investors, we have executives, we have people from family offices, we have entrepreneurs. Not everyone is extremely familiar. So maybe as you go over ViajaNet, just highlight a few things that you guys, that you think are really key lessons in this very, very unique case.
Sure. So let me take a step back actually and explain what we look for in a startup. The ViajaNet's actually a very interesting story, and I'll touch on that in a little bit because we actually helped to found that business, and then we actually did a special situations investment in the midst of the pandemic. But zooming out for a second, everyone says in early stage technology they're looking to invest in strong founders or a great team. But what does that mean? It's very vague. So we are very specific in what we look for when we invest in a startup. So we look for 4 things. We look for team, business, valuation, and does it fit our thesis? Our thesis is marketplaces. And within the concept of marketplaces, there are certain trends that we see right now. So we see the verticalization of horizontals. What that means is that the version 1.0 of marketplaces were Mercado Libre, eBay, Amazon, Craigslist, multi-category, very broad, everything store. But we believe that there's actually a better experience to be built if you take specific categories, you make them their own marketplace, and you can give very category-specific features that can enhance the user experience. So for example, if you use Airbnb instead of OLXs to book a stay, you can actually add features like virtual tours, you can add insurance, you can add all sorts of different category-specific features. So we believe that there are still hundreds of marketplaces to be built by taking the major categories of classified sites and making them independent marketplaces with delightful customer experiences. So that's one of the things we're looking for. Then we're looking for managed marketplaces. Taking the old school marketplace and online classified site was simply a listing, and it often required double opt-in, what's called a double commit. But we believe that the marketplace can do more work in a transaction and to enhance the experience. The perfect example of this is Loft. Loft is trying to become the end-to-end marketplace for real estate. You don't just go there and you list your home and then that's just a classified site like the Zap Viva Real. Instead, what Loft is trying to do is they're trying to really be the single end-to-end experience and helping with things like mortgage, helping with things like touching up and being the portal, the broker, like really the entire experience. And then last but not least, we're very interested in B2B marketplaces. Consumer, we believe, is about 10 years ahead of B2B. We think there's an opportunity to take the amazing practices that we've seen in consumer marketplaces and apply that to old industry. A good example of this is we did a seed investment in Brazil in a business called Oiko. What they're trying to do is they're trying to be a marketplace for construction materials on demand. So if you're a contractor and you need some extra lumber, you actually go in the Oiko marketplace and they will help source it for you and have it delivered to you. And so it's taking almost that Uber-like experience and bringing it to construction, for example. And then last but not least, we believe that the future of work, future of food, fintech, and automotive, these have been traditionally the largest classifieds verticals. There's an opportunity to build massive businesses in these. And of course, In auto, we incubated a business called Instacaro in Brazil, but you're seeing Kavak come in force. Real estate, we talked about Loft. Everyone knows Nubank in fintech. And then you see Rappi, which we seeded in food. And so the list goes on and on. So we think there are tons of really interesting opportunities. In terms of team, what we really care about is storytelling and execution. We believe that it's vital for a founder to be a good storyteller because it helps reduce the risk of funding, of recruiting, of business development, all of the difficult challenges that you face in an early stage startup. The better your storytelling skills and your communication skills, the easier it is to overcome them. And then when we talk about execution, we want to see someone who is metrics driven, is analytical, is operational, and they've demonstrated grit and tenacity and passion for what they're doing. So we test for that in our phone calls. We want to make sure they understand their metrics. When we're looking at marketplaces, we're not taking technical risk. It's not like a robotic surgery startup, for example. Instead, the marketplace playbook is relatively tried and true. It's really an execution risk. So we want to make sure our founders understand thoroughly unit economics and finance and marketing. And so it's a different type of risk that we care about. And then last but not least, in terms of the business, we want to make sure that there is $1 billion plus potential enterprise value. Frankly, in all of the categories that we've talked about, that is the case, and that's why we like those categories. But we want to make sure that this business that we're looking at has market leader potential, it's scalable and capital efficient, and the unit economics are attractive, whether the real unit economics or the theoretical unit economics if the product isn't live yet. So I'll stop for a second. I know that was a lot.
No, this is fantastic. Here in Brazil, we have this saying that if you are not a salesperson, if you don't have, if you're not that's kind of like we say, if you're not a salesperson and you want to found a company, you better get somebody that is good at selling in your founding team, something like that. It goes with your storytelling comment there. What I want to hear is that you didn't elaborate on valuation. How do you guys do valuation in 2 phone calls? I know you don't lead rounds, but you have done so many deals. Please talk to us a little bit about your approach at FJ Labs and best practices that you see in the market.
Now, especially at an early stage, valuation is an art more than a science. You can pull from public market comparables, you can pull from recent financings, but at the end of the day, you're taking a variety of variables and you're trying to come together with what you deem to be an acceptable valuation. Now, the key for us is, I touched on this before, we don't actually determine the valuation. We work with a local institutional venture firm. They're the ones that determine the valuation and they negotiate the valuation with the VC. We come in at the end of the process and we decide, do we think this valuation is reasonable? And what we typically look at is GMV, gross merchandise value. That's typically the sales going through the platform. We will look at a multiple of GMV. We will look at the take rate. If this is a marketplace, what percentage of the transaction does the marketplace take? What are the margins on that take rate? And then we compare all of these different multiples to the growth of the business, to the perceived quality of the founder. And I can share this afterwards. We actually have made a table on our website. We call it the valuation matrix. And this gives you a general sense of some of the heuristics that we use when we're valuing these startups. But I will tell you that valuations in Brazil right now are extremely high, but they are in technology everywhere.
Yeah, unbelievable. I saw a couple of firms with people that I really admire, and they had nothing but a PowerPoint, but a very strong team and valuations of about $15 million. Things that we would hear in the Silicon Valley, but not in Brazil. They may build something really big and special, but that has changed. 5 years ago, it was not like that. But before we talk about the market here, please tell us about is this your first Brazilian company that you're on the board of? Tell us about ViajaNet. Sure.
So we typically don't take board seats. It's actually an important part of our model to not take board seats. The situation of ViajaNet is a unique one because we have been shareholders in this company for about 10 years. And this is a business that was hit extremely hard by the pandemic. And I was doing work on this business about a year ago, and I saw an opportunity, frankly. This is a fundamentally strong business. Going into the pandemic, it was profitable. It was growing very nicely. It was the number 2 player behind Despegar in the online travel segment. And frankly, things were looking very, very good. And then, of course, the pandemic came, and it became the fixed costs of running a travel business like this did not go away. And the business, its revenue went to effectively zero overnight. And so we had a quick decision to make. And I basically stepped in and I said, to me, this is a bit of a binary outcome. Do we believe that travel will ever come back? And if travel comes back, when will it come back? And do we think travel comes back in 1 year or 2 years, or do we think it takes 20 years to recover? And I said, my bet, I think that travel will take 1 to 2 years to come back. And I think that if we can get this business to the other side of the pandemic, the competitive landscape will actually be a lot easier because others may fail. And I think there's going to be a major rebound in travel. And I think this business will come out the other side stronger. So there's an opportunity for us because some of the other investors are pretty fatigued. The business has been around for about 10 years now. I think actually 12 years. What if we were to actually do a special situation investment, take almost like an ownership position here? I take a board seat. I structure a deal where we rescue this business. We give them enough capital to withstand the pandemic, and either travel comes back and then we have a home run of an investment, a huge win, or it doesn't, and that's okay. And so to me, it was really that simple. And I think you see Silver Lake did this with Airbnb in the depths of the pandemic in the US. And a couple of other people have made similar bets. And I think obviously things have taken a bit longer to come back than we expected. And now you see the Delta variant all around the world. But I still feel optimistic that if this business can make it to the other side, we're going to have a really nice win in our hands. So, but I want to emphasize that we have the ability to be opportunistic because we are a small and nimble firm, but this is very, very unique for us. Our model is typically to be the institutional angels. So for us to do an opportunity like this was pretty special, and I'm pretty excited by it.
Interesting. Yeah, I cannot wait to see what is going to happen. Just yesterday, I was talking to C-Trip, the Chinese guy. They are really large.
Yeah,
their numbers are unbelievable. And, things, even though in China, official numbers, they have had less than 5,000 people that died from COVID and less than 100,000 cases in all of COVID officially as of now. And they are struggling because international travel and all. I don't know if struggling is the right word, but they are not doing as well as they used to do. So this must be some fun times for you. Now, Jeff, you have been covering Brazil for quite a while, and I think you have a very unique perspective because you do early stage investing all over, not only in Brazil. So walk us through, what do you think is happening here in Brazil? What do you think is going to happen? And what are the areas that excite you the most here in Brazil? And what are the areas that excite you the least?
Frankly, it's a very exciting time to be investing in Brazil, but it's also a very scary time because we talked about this very briefly before, but the valuations that we're seeing in Brazil feel, frankly, disconnected from reality. At the end of the day, Brazil is an extremely exciting place to be investing, but it's also Brazil. And so we've invested through a number of cycles here. To give you a sense, we first invested in Novum Shop in 2011. So this business, I'm not sure if everyone's seen, to give you a quick primer, Novum Shop is like a Shopify for Latin America. So it helps small merchants list e-commerce sites and offer their products online effectively. And they're doing very well. The pandemic was amazing for them. They have 80,000 small businesses on the platform. And we invested alongside Kazek and Qualcomm Ventures and Excel, the very prominent US firm. And most recently, it was announced that they raised $500 million at a $3.1 billion valuation. co-led by Tiger Global and Insight, two very large US growth equity firms. Now, when we invested in Novum Shop in 2011, we invested at a $500,000 pre-money valuation.
Wow.
So that just goes to show what the market was like then versus how it is now. And I will tell you that we think this is a fantastic business, and we think that could very well be the Shopify of Latin America. But at the same time, it is scary to see Tiger Global doing a deal every week in Brazil. Tiger Global has been here before. You saw this prior to 2015, 2016. Tiger Global was active in Brazil and they pulled out. And it feels like a lot of that capital is coming back. But it doesn't feel like really anything has changed. Like I think that a lot of the macroeconomic risks remain. And while I do think that we're starting to see amazing adoption, if you look at Nubank, for example, you're starting to see a lot of these theses play out. The rapid increase in valuation, to give you a sense, the Novum Shop round is effectively a 15 times markup in 1 year. Do I think Novum Shop is 15 times more valuable than it was a year ago? No, I don't. Do I think that Novum Shop could be a $30 billion business in 5 years? Yeah, I do. So it's just a question of why are we seeing these valuations the way we are, and what does it mean as an investor? Well, for us, one of the hallmarks of our strategy is when we feel that valuations have become disconnected from reality, we will sell a piece of our stake. This is a pretty unusual in venture capital because typically the lead investor, the Sequoia Capital, the Accel, they have 20% ownership of a business. If they sell a piece of their stake, it signals to the market that they lack conviction, they lack confidence. That could kill a business. But we actually are so small. We typically have less than 3% ownership in any business. So it's very easy for us to sell a piece of our stake. And we recycle it and we redeploy it elsewhere. Typically, we redeploy it at the early stage where the valuations are a bit less crazy. And so frankly, what I think we'll do is we'll probably sell a piece of our stake and we will realize an incredible, unprecedented multiple, and we'll redeploy it to some really interesting early stage startups. And so the amount of activity, I'll say, one of the interesting things about venture capital and the tech ecosystem is that it is very much, not only do startups within themselves have network effects, but actually like startup ecosystems have network effects. So Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because of all of the previous successes. Each one of them will spawn off another 50 amazing teams. Out of those, some will work, and that an ecosystem is born. The really cool thing about Brazil now is you're starting to see the seeds of the ecosystem prosper. And so, for example, Rappi is leading to dozens of new teams starting businesses all across the continent. And so you're starting to see a bit of a Rappi mafia, and you're going to start seeing this with Loft, and you're going to see this with Nubank. And so from every great success, the seeds of new startups will come out and they will blossom. And so I am very excited about the future of Brazilian tech. I just worry that like every market boom and bust cycle, I feel like there may be a bit of euphoria right now, which may be outdistancing the reality of the tech.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. A couple of comments here. For those that do not know, Tiger Global has been doing this year about one deal per day globally. And Jeff said, as of now, it feels like they're doing about one a week in Brazil and Latam. Could be right. And it's very special to talk to you, Jeff, because I was looking at the numbers, and Series B, C, D, and E, above Series B, in every single tech investment in Brazil, in 80% of the rounds, there are international players joining the rounds. We don't see international players coming so early like you guys. Sequoia wrote that letter. It's a must read for those of you watching us. Just Google Sequoia letter Latin America, you will find it. But they did a couple deals. Andreessen Horowitz are doing a few deals early, but you guys are very focused on early. So when you talk to me about how valuations are so disconnected in Brazil from reality, I second you. I hear you on that. But now I really like what you said, how startups ecosystem have network effects. Here, Instituto Caldeira is this entity in the South that put together large companies, startups, the government, the best universities, a whole ecosystem in a physical place, but also online, and trying to build a real ecosystem. There has been a lot of special cases and successes. One of them is Agibank, that we cannot call a startup. It's more of a unicorn, probably. I don't even know the valuation. But there are a bunch. I want to ask you, elaborate a little further when you talk about the best ecosystem you've been around and you live in the Silicon Valley. What would you say are the key lessons that people down here in Instituto Caldeira should pay close attention? What are the mistakes that we should avoid, and so on?
Well, I think, frankly, the pandemic has really changed things, and the pandemic has made things global. And so the network effects that you saw at a local and regional level have weakened a bit. And so it's no longer the case that Silicon Valley VCs will only invest in Silicon Valley. I mean, you mentioned Sequoia. Sequoia wrote this letter. They basically declared that they're going to plant their flag back in Brazil again. And so, and it's not just Sequoia. I mean, you see Founders Fund is very, Peter Thiel's firm. He's very active in Brazil now. Tiger Global, of course, Insight. So the capital is coming, and I hope that it's here to stay this time. So the thing that's unique this time around is that people are okay building with remote talent, and so we've always been comfortable when our businesses have been hiring. We've always used tech teams in Latin America. That's always been the norm. But now we're seeing startups in the U.S. hiring tech in Latin America all the time. In fact, one of our startups in Brazil, Revelo, they started off as a engineering job board for Brazil, effectively, but now the vast majority of their new hires are U.S. startups hiring in Brazil. So I think in terms of the lesson to be learned, first of all, VCs will now invest anywhere, truly anywhere. And so the opportunity is there. If you build an amazing company, it doesn't matter where it is, capital can find you. And the rules, the traditional rules of the board member has to be in the same city as you or a short plane flight away, that's changed. So I keep that in mind, and I think hopefully again that stays the case, and that things don't return, because I think this is a great development, because there's such an uneven distribution of capital, and I think talent is evenly distributed around the world, and I think there is a chance for some of this talent to get discovered and funded.
Very interesting. Jeff, I was looking at the CB Insights numbers, and it says that in the US, about 1/4 of all the capital allocated to VC rounds in tech startups comes from CVCs, from corporate venture capital funds. And in Brazil, this is still starting. It's growing very rapidly, but it's nowhere near 25% of all the investments. But we do have some people here in the audience that run CVCs in their companies. What are the recommendations that you have? The best CVCs you have co-invested, what do they have in common? The worst ones, what should people avoid? I like to learn from others' mistakes.
It's a great question, and I actually have a lot of experience with CVCs. So we actually, in addition to investing, Fabrice and Jose, the FJ Labs founders, in addition to investing their capital, we have a fund that we manage, and a number of our limited partners, a number of our investors were CVCs. And so I've seen a whole different variety of structures. I think one of the big challenges that CVCs face is retaining talent. A lot of CVCs have trouble compensating their employees the same way that traditional VCs do. And so what we've seen is that the churn of CVCs is extremely high. And so to give you a sense, we have 4 corporate LPs, and I am the point of contact for these corporate LPs. And our last fund we raised 3 years ago, and each of these corporate VCs has a new point person. Some of them have had 2 new point persons since I've been managing the relationship. So we've had 100% turnover across these CVCs. in some cases more than 100% turnover, and that's the norm. And I think that makes it very hard to build a lasting institution. And the other thing is that it's very hard to win deals. I think you have to be very self-aware as a corporate to understand that we're in an extremely competitive environment, and people are going to see you on, and they're going to ask, especially at the early stage, they're going to ask, why are you letting this corporate in when you could have a financial investor instead? It may serve as a negative signal if you're not careful, but the best CVCs, in my opinion, are actually the ones that are purely financially driven, and they may help in terms of surfacing opportunities for the corporate, but they don't let their hands get tied by like too narrow of a strategic mandate. They're run almost like an independent arm of the corporate with total autonomy, and they are willing to compensate their talent accordingly.
Got it. Yeah, this high turnover is a huge issue, because VC investing is long-term investing. And investment in a startup, you're going to see the returns in 10, 15 years. It's similar to some marriage, as some say. Jeff, you mentioned that you deal with some LPs. I want to know, we also have people here that invest, a lot of people that invest in VC funds. What do the best LPs ask you? What do they worry about? What do you say? Oh, you invest in funds, right? Personally, what are you careful about? What do you really care when you invest in a VC fund? What should we be watching as we choose a VC fund to invest in?
It's an amazing question, and I think it really comes down to process. I think a lot of people, we like to think about process versus outcome when we're making decisions of any kind, and when we are looking at a decision to be made and what the result is of that decision, we always question. We can't necessarily control the outcome, but what we can control is the process, and that applies to VCs as well. Right now, everyone looks like a genius in venture capital. The markets are euphoric, valuations are off the charts, and so right now you really have to laser focus on process differentiation. What are you doing that is unique to your firm that offers you a competitive advantage? Why are you going to provide meaningful returns over many cycles? Because I'm not certain of many things, but I am certain that this will not last. At some point, things will change. I don't know when, but things will change. And at that point, we're going to see who the posers are versus like the real structures that are built to last. And truthfully, anybody who invested in any venture vintages in 2015 to 2019, they're making tons and tons of money now. But when you invest with a venture manager, like you said, it's like a marriage. I think I read the average length of a marriage in the United States is 9 years, and the average venture fund length is 10 years. So it's actually longer than a marriage. And when you're investing across multiple funds. So I can tell you what we look for when we talk to LPs is we're looking for like-minded people who are thoughtful and are going to work with us across four funds. That means this is a multi-decade relationship. And so when you as an LP, you should be looking, you don't want to have manager turnover in your portfolio. You want to find persistent outperformance. And the way you find that persistent outperformance is through process differentiation. And that process could be many different things. In the case of FJ Labs, it's the way we're structured, the institutional angel investing that's unique. And I think the brand name and the reputation of Fabrice and Jose and FJ Labs. In the case of Andreessen Horowitz, it might be they have a 100-person platform team and they connect you to all the most influential people in US culture. And they have such a massive fund and they do high valuations. Sequoia, their best fund ever, they plug you into their network. So it's something to think about when you're committing to venture funds. What's the process differentiation?
I like that. Thanks for sharing that. Before, we were talking, you told me about the Russian guys that built something very large in Russia, were very successful. And then they moved down to Brazil to start a venture focusing on education. Please tell us a little bit about this latest investment of yours. And the reason why I ask you this is I talk all the time to executives of large companies. And I like to ask this very open-ended question, which is, tell me about your biggest challenges. And it's almost unanimous that virtually all of them tell me, Ricardo, I just do not have enough tech talent. And this is a little absurd in Brazil due to the fact that we have over 14 million people unemployed. So tell us a little bit about this latest investment, and then take that as a tangent. And you have done investments in the education sector all over. Tell us, elaborate a little bit further on this sector, please.
This is not just a pain point in Brazil, but all over the world. In the US, you see this as well. There is a fierce competitive war for tech talent. And this is the number one pain point for every startup that we talk with as well. It is absolutely brutal out there. And the skills gap is something that we think is one of the most exciting opportunities in LATAM is the fact that you have this you have this mismatch. You have this incredible blossoming ecosystem of tech startups, and there is really near infinite demand for tech talent. And you have a high unemployment rate. You have an educated population, but you just don't have that. You have this mismatch in skills. So what we invested in, I can't share the name yet. It's not public, but it's a startup which is basically upskilling, and it's offering online education with the goal of basically producing the next generation of tech talent. And there's some really interesting models like this all around the world, and we're seeing a lot of these in Latin America. And what I really like is the concept of tying the outcome of the education to the cost of the program. So there's a famous or somewhat famous startup in the United States called Lambda School, and what they're trying to do is, in the U.S., college education is a fortune. It can cost $200,000 to get a 4-year degree, and many of those degrees are not even useful. It could be so. It's a huge problem in the United States. And so what Lambda School has done is they've created an online college effectively for data science and for software engineering. It's free to attend. And the way it works is they only get paid after you get a job, and they take a percentage of your earnings. And so they have relationships with a lot of the best startups in the US and actually globally now. And they will actually serve as like placement, like recruiting firms for these startups. And in return, they earn 18%, or the number varies, of the yearly salary for 3 years or for 4 years of these students upon placement. And we think that model is really interesting. We're studying that all around the world. We're looking at some of these models in Brazil, and we think that this is an incredible ed tech writ large. Ed tech in Brazil is an incredible opportunity, and we think there are going to be many unicorns built in this area.
Jeff, I'm glad you went into detail about Lambda. We have just invested in a company here called Driven that is a very similar model. The thing is, Lambda, Brazilian companies cannot pay developers that graduated from Lambda because they're going to earn in dollars. You just cannot compete. So it's basically a very similar playbook here in Brazil. The difference of Driven is that they first built a company that have over 2 million people in their base that are students of the best engineering schools in Brazil. So they're fishing in that pond. And they have just launched in the first 3 batches, more than 20,000 people applying, with the same way that they don't pay to study. When they get a job, they pay a cut of their salary to the school. So Driven, for those of you interested. Jeff, I have a question here from the audience, which is Gabriel Minucci wants to know, what is your biggest disappointment regarding a startup that you had seen a lot of great potential and then it just didn't materialize?
I think the most painful experience we've had in the past couple of years was we actually incubated. And when I say incubated, it means that we were very hands-on. We helped assemble the founding team. We had high ownership in. We had a board seat on. And this business was a managed car marketplace in the United States. And it was basically helping people buy used cars online. That business was very it burned a lot of money. It was very exciting. It raised a lot of money. This was in 2015 till 2017. And the business blew up after raising $150 million. And now if you look just a couple of years later, there's a business which is identical in the United States. It's called Carvana, and it is a 50 billion valuation. And I think had we just been a little bit maybe less aggressive in growth, and had we just made a couple of different decisions, that could have been us. And so that feels like the biggest miss that we've had recently. We've had a lot of.
Can you share again the name of the company that you?
I didn't say it, but the name is Beepy. It's a Beepi.
Yeah, I know the founder from Argentina. I know one of the founders that now
Ale or Owen.
Ale Resnick, that now started the real estate play, right?
Yep, the Long Homes. I was tweeting with him today.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, so, Jeff, I know you have a hard stop in a couple minutes. So, do you have any closing remarks, my friend?
I think I was thinking about this the other day. It's frankly, it can be depressing to read the news. I think like a lot of, I think part of that is just the news, at least here in the United States. It's endless negativity. It's bringing the lowlights from everything we see all around the world, and then in the U.S. and as well. And I was listening to David Velez on a podcast earlier today, and he was talking about the same thing in Brazil. And I think it's easy to get bogged down in the negativity, but the area where I'm extremely optimistic is tech solving problems and the deflationary powers of tech. And we think that honestly, the way we can make the most positive impact on the world is by investing in tech and by helping the next generation of startups. And I think all you have to do is look at the wave of innovation taking place in Brazil to see that this is true. And I think there are amazing things taking place due to tech. And I think that it's exciting, it's amazing, it's good for the world. And we're very, very optimistic, and we remain optimistic about building startups in Brazil and frankly in the world writ large.
Fantastic. I like your positivity. Jeff, I know you have less than 1 minute, but is there anything you need help with from Brazil?
We're always looking for great startups. If anybody has seen any interesting online marketplace startups or any founding teams that are thinking about their next things, please consider FJ Labs. We would love to chat with them.
Fantastic. Jeff, have a great one. Everybody, visit fjlabs.com. He told us about the valuation matrix. I honestly have not looked at it yet. I cannot wait. And thank you again, Jeff. I'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Maravilha, pessoal. Agora ele tem que sair aí às 6h15. Vamos continuar aqui o nosso papo. Eu estou tentando aqui trazer o melhor do planeta para o Instituto Caldeira, que a gente merece. O que é bacana desse cara e do FJ Labs, como ele falou, é que eles investiram em mais de 700 empresas no mundo inteiro. Então, quando um cara desse, que investe no mundo inteiro, em early stage, né, super cedo, vem para o Brasil e fala a frase que ele falou, que eu vou ler aqui direitinho, que eu até anotei, as valuations, né, o quanto vale essas empresas de early stage no Brasil estão completamente desconectadas da realidade. É um negócio para a gente prestar atenção, né? Então, como fazer a valuation? Quanto vale uma startup? É realmente um exercício muito complicado. Quando eu vejo e converso com muitos empreendedores e fundos, é o meu dia a dia, o pessoal acaba fazendo essa conta, falando, eu vi que as outras empresas parecidas, com time parecido, nesse meu setor, tem isso. Ou então eles falam, eu vou vender 20% da minha empresa e 20% eu preciso de X milhões para captar. E assim que dá a valuation. Tem várias maneiras de serem feitas. Mas uma coisa que eu aprendi, teve uma live super bacana, um desses podcasts com o Alex Barry, o Martin Escobar da General Atlantic, o Paulo Passoni do SoftBank. E eles estavam conversando sobre esse tema. E aí o Martin falou um negócio que eu acho muito relevante, que ele fala, é difícil fazer valuation, a gente investe no mundo inteiro também, mas é o seguinte, em algum momento, essa companhia tem que valer 20 vezes lucro. Então, Isso eu acho que é uma coisa muito importante para quem está pensando em fazer investimentos em companhias ou até precificar a tua própria empresa, é lembrar dessa palavra mágica lucro, né? Que é a força motriz da geração de valor e que muitas vezes, quando as coisas estão começando, é pouco comentada. Então, é só um dos comentários que eu queria fazer que realmente eu acho que eu vou levar muito. A outra coisa que ele falou da questão dos CVCs, né, dos Corporate Venture Capitals. Então, vejo uma quantidade gigantesca de empresas fazendo suas estruturas mais formais para investir em startups. E você viu o que ele falou, né? De maneira, uma pergunta super aberta. Pô, comenta de CVC. Não, tenho muita experiência, relacionamento com eles. O problema é que quem trabalha no CVC está fazendo um trabalho de VC e não é recompensado como um VC. E aí acaba saindo. Então, os Estados Unidos é muito mais desenvolvido que o Brasil nisso, onde ele está lá no dia a dia. Mas quem for de grande empresa e estiver fazendo CVC, é muito importante pôr pessoas ali na liderança daqui que vão ficar na empresa por muito tempo, porque esse conhecimento é difícil transferir. Bom, tô recebendo umas perguntas aqui, o Pedro está me mandando, vão mandando perguntas, a gente vai chegar ao final aqui, eu espero que vocês tenham gostado e aprendido muito, eu gostei demais. O Pedro está me perguntando um pouco das empresas de crescimento e como é feito a valuation dessas empresas, e de novo, né? É um pouco o que o Jeff falou, que nesse momento muito investidor em tecnologia está parecendo um gênio. O mercado está eufórico e o pessoal faz uma rodada. A lógica dos VCs muitas vezes é levar a companhia de seed para Series A, de Series A para Series B, de Series B para Series C. Tem fundos que são especializados em cada uma dessas etapas. Então, o FJ Labs é especializado no mais cedo lá, no investimento semente, lá bem no comecinho mesmo. E aí, quando a empresa vai crescendo, eles vão diminuindo a posição deles ou até saem das companhias. Quando a gente vai para um estágio mais longo, que a empresa já está mais em crescimento, a gente vê que as companhias nos Estados Unidos, que tem um mercado de capitais muito mais avançado, as companhias estão ficando privadas por mais tempo. Elas estão vindo fazer o IPO, vindo para o mercado, depois que elas são maiores. E os fundos, os hedge funds, as assets que antes eram focadas principalmente em empresas listadas, estão começando a vir mais cedo, fazendo esses modelos híbridos. Então, tem muita mudança acontecendo. Mas se eu for resumir a minha opinião aqui, eu diria que eu concordo bastante com o Jeff nesse ponto de que em algum momento a música vai parar de tocar. Em algum momento, essa abundância de capital realmente vai diminuir. Quando? Não sei. Ninguém sabe, na verdade. Mas não vai continuar. Não vai só para cima e para a direita, igual a maioria dos decks, a maioria das apresentações de empreendedores que eu recebo aqui é assim, né? As estimativas são para cima e para a direita e tem sido assim. Mas em breve eu acho que vai ter uma correção. Bom, pessoal, não recebi mais nenhuma pergunta aqui. Quero respeitar o tempo de vocês. Estamos chegando ao final. Tem bastante coisa para a gente discutir, mas talvez valha a pena eu aprofundar nesse case que ele comentou para vocês da Lambda School. Então, que loucura, né? Que nosso país, com mais de 14 milhões de desempregados, e você pergunta para as grandes empresas, para as startups, é um problema generacional que a gente está vivendo, que é o tal do apagão em mão de obra qualificada para a parte de tecnologia. Então, tem vários modelos. A oferta e a demanda, eles ajudam a resolver problemas, mas demora. Então, a gente vê grandes empresas investindo elas mesmas na formação dessa mão de obra tech, fazendo upskilling dos seus funcionários, fazendo escolas internas, e esse é um problema tão sério que a gente aqui na 3G Radar fez o nosso primeiro investimento direto em uma startup na Driven, que é a Responde Aí, Driven, que eu comentei com o Jeff, porque realmente a demanda, como ele falou ali, infinita globalmente. E aqui no Brasil, antes da pandemia, as empresas já demandavam cerca de 70 mil profissionais todo ano e só se formavam 30 a 40 mil. Com a pandemia, esse número de demanda só aumentou e a oferta não conseguiu acompanhar. Então, esse gap, estimam que nos próximos 4 anos, teremos mais de 400 mil vagas que não conseguirão ser preenchidas nessa parte de mão de obra técnica qualificada. E outro problema é que com a nossa moeda muito fraca, os melhores aqui no Brasil, eles jogam em todas as ligas do mundo, e aí a gente vê pessoas do Reino Unido, da Europa, da América do Norte, vindo contratar os melhores aqui, com essa coisa de poder trabalhar de casa, o pessoal topa. Então, é realmente uma das grandes equações aí. Então, estou muito feliz com o desenvolvimento do Instituto Caldeira. Não sei se alguém tem mais alguma pergunta, senão acho que a gente vai chegar ao final aqui e depois tem mais, trazer o melhor do mundo para vocês. Então, mandem recado aí se vocês gostaram, se vocês viram valor nesse conteúdo, avisem o pessoal do Caldeira para a gente ver que direção vai. Nosso objetivo aqui é realmente trazer o melhor do planeta para o Caldeira, e essa nossa comunidade incrível aqui que vai, não tenho dúvida nenhuma, impactar muito o sul do Brasil e o Brasil como um todo. Então, fico por aqui. Ricardo Geromel, um grande abraço, até a próxima. Obrigado. Tchau, tchau.